Hi everyone, welcome back to another edition of videos. Today I wanted to show you my recent classical game on the Lead Chess 45 minute league. Another really fun game. I was playing as white and the game started with the move e4 and my opponents played e5, and you may have seen my other videos. I've gone for knight f3 or bishop at c4 or even bishop to c3, but here I decided to play something a little bit crazier, and that was with the move f4. So this enters into something known as the King's Gambit, an extremely popular opening back in the 19th century. But nowadays, not as popular, but it still leads to some crazy games, particularly in the e takes and f4 lines. There are some absolutely crazy games. This is the most popular line and the most played line. The idea being that black will try and hold on to the pawn. Meanwhile, white will try and absolutely destroy black with really active pieces and throwing basically the kitchen sink at his opponent. But against this, my opponent decided to elect for a different line, the d5 line, which is known as the Falkbeer counter-gambit. And yeah, I saw this in my preparation. I knew he played this line, so I was sort of learning about what to do in this white. And well, this is known as the Falkbeer counter-gambit. It's a very aggressive counter-gambit by black, where he in fact gives back a pawn, but he gets some very interesting complications. And I looked at quite a few different lines. In a lot of them, black ends up getting a lot of good piece activity. So the main line continues e takes on d5. Just very quickly, just for you guys, you don't want to take this way. This leads to an immediate defeat by white. I hope you can see the move that black can play here. But essentially, you can do queen to h4. And well, this king has to move basically. If you play the move g3 thinking that it blocks the check, well, this attack then comes in and the queen is going to win a whole rook here. So definitely not a good line. So you want to take this way, and this is where it gets very interesting in terms of the theory, as I'm pretty sure when I was younger and first getting into the King's Gambit, this e4 idea was the most popular line for a long time. And well, essentially the idea being that it stops this knight from developing to its natural square on f3, and well, it really just acts as a bit of a thorn in white's side. So you have to play the move d3 to try and remove it, and then black can just keep defending it. After d takes, knight to f3, so the knight can now come out. Bishop c5. There's some really quite interesting complications with these two pieces now creating a potential fork. The good news for white is he scores very well after the move queen to e2, and then this just exploits this pin. And again, I was looking at a lot of these lines. It seems to do absolutely fine for white, so this should be absolutely okay. I'll just give you an example line. So maybe bishop to f5, trying to defend the knight. Knight to c3. Queen to e2, bishop here. There's a few exchanges off, but I think white emerges out okay here. We've got well, white is in fact up a pawn, and okay, his pawn shot is not brilliant, but his piece activity is actually still nowhere near behind black here, and well, it's the reason why basically white scores extremely well out of this, particularly in the Masters games. So just to give you an example, continuation, knight to bishop to e4, knight to g5. Okay, reclaim the pawn, but well, black's development really falls behind here, and I much prefer white's position here. It's much more active. He's got his lovely rooks on these lovely open files. Should do absolutely fine here. So I think quite a favourable endgame in my opinion. So another move actually, that just so I can kind of just to show you, if actually bishop came to f2, this would be just actually a clean mistake. It looks really tempting because the continuation looks really quite strong for black, but in actual fact it's a total mirage, I suppose. So king comes to d1. So now just remember, this knight is still hanging. So okay, knight, queen can capture on d5, now protecting and also delivering a check. So it looks like black's getting a lot of tempo here, but actually knight to f2. knight to f2 d2, sorry. So now exploiting that pin. If f5 to try and defend the knight, well, knight to c3. This knight's going to fall at some point, and once this knight falls, this bishop has to then move out of the way. And it's no wonder I'm looking at my engine, it's giving this position 3.8 for white. So it's just saying you're up a clear piece, you should be absolutely fine here. So yeah, some really interesting lines. So this is what I remember being the main line for a long time. The move that I've seen played as well, and I've played myself, is c6 here. So this is entering into the old Nimzovich line, where he sacrifices a second pawn. So after, let's say, d takes here, so just taking the second pawn. The actual main line actually goes knight to c3, so actually not taking the pawn straight away. But the most obvious move, what happens if you take here? Well, knight captures back, and black just gets ahead in developments, and yeah, he just scores really well in this position. Again, I'll just show you some example lines. So, you know, let's say white sacrifices a pawn back. It gets quite interesting. There's some particular complications. This sort of stuff doesn't work. But you know, black just gets on with his development. He's going to get his other knight into play, and castle should do absolutely fine. And as I say, it scores very well. It certainly equalises the position from here. So that brings us to the final move, which is the main, which is now the main line, I should say. As I say, I don't remember it being the main line. So certainly when I look at the Masters database, there's a lot of recent games, and I mean a lot. We're looking at Hikaru Nakamura, Magnus Carlsen, Wang Yi, Ivanchuk have played in this particular line. So it's clearly you know, a lot of games from 2017, 18, 19. Clearly it's become very popular in recent times, and that's actually just to capture this pawn back straight away. And yeah, absolutely fine. I think white's you know, black kind of equalises quite nicely in this position, but I think white gets a lot of good play as well. So the main line continues, knight to f3, and knight comes to f6 now, to attacking the pawn. And here we defend with the bishop, knight captures and castles. So we just get on with our development, we get all our pieces out nice and quickly. But you know, black's no slouch either. He now can get his bishop over. And bear in mind as well, black is up a pawn here, so at some point I've got a waste to move to try and reclaim this pawn back. And I looked at quite a lot of positions on the Masters database from here. And well, the main line is actually bishop to b3, which to me, I guess, I didn't really like this move all that much, because it sort of gives up a move. Okay, it gets the bishop into a bit of a safer position. There's no sort of some weird tactics with the knight or something. But I didn't really like the idea of giving a tempo back to black. In some of the lines I looked at, bishop to e7. Okay, maybe move like, if I go down the main line, c4 now, knight to b6, d4. I wasn't too happy with these sort of lines. You know, white gives up a pawn here now. Okay, you go quite far ahead in development, but again, I'm not too happy with this sort of stuff. I think the black can maybe safely castle his king. And okay, you know, white's created some early complications, but I think black should do okay here. I would like to think anyway. But so I didn't particularly like those lines I was looking at. So I decided to place it a little bit differently here. It's the second most popular move, but I think it's certainly an interesting try here. And that's queen to e2, so actually exploiting this pin. There's lots of little nasty tricks now with this this bishop. You know, because if for whatever reason, let's say this. I don't know, it moves out the way, or move this queen out the way to like this square or something, stupid as it sounds. We can now take this this knight, and obviously this bishop can't recapture back. So it creates a little bit of practical issues for black to try and sort out. And here he played in what I would consider probably the weakest move here, and well, I said the weakest move, but the first maybe inaccuracy in the position. He played c5. Which is very suspicious. There's no Masters games in this position, so it's certainly a novelty. But weirdly, on the Lee Chess database, black has nearly won every single game. So I must say it's a bit of a tricky move to me, and I spent quite a lot of time thinking here as to what to do, because I was like, okay, I'm out of book now. I need to think actually how I play against this. But there's a few practical problems for me. I'd love to play d4, but obviously the pawn captures back. The reason why I want to play, d4, we'll move this pawn forward, is I want to try and reclaim this pawn back, get back my material. But it's easier said than done. The other move that I thought about, and perhaps I should have played, and I maybe should have tried to convince myself playing the line, was knight to c3. And this is the best move here. It's been reached in nearly all the lead chess games. But I think I was just a bit too worried about messing up my pawn structure with the double pawns. But in actual fact, the double pawns really do aid my position. After knight captures, this would actually be a clear mistake, as after d takes, let's say bishop to e7. There's a lot of problems here for this bishop as to what he can do, how we can get out of this. If let's say he goes to queen to d7, potentially do I have moves like knight here maybe? I'm just going to turn on the engine. Or knight to g4, even stronger, yeah. I like the look of this position now. So just clearly threatening the knight. If let's say bishop here, I can capture this. Can he take with the queen, I wonder? Oh no, he can't, because obviously, yeah. So he just wins the pawn back, and well, this king's flank is really weak now. You can start coming crashing in the position. The computer absolutely adores this line. I think I've got ideas of getting my rook onto d1, creating some pressure along here. Black's king's position is really unsafe here. It's going to be incredibly difficult to try and get out of this alive. So in any case, that wasn't the move that was played. So you would have to play maybe bishop to e7, and then after that maybe you can just go up a clear pawn. White wins back the pawn, and he's got a lot of weak pawns to capture later. Also, I think the biggest problem for black here though is his king's just trapped in the centre of the board. It can't castle. It's completely stranded. So it's weird actually. The best move here is actually just to try and trade queens off, and well, you can create some more complications with knights to g4 here now. But I actually think this should be fine, this line as well. Let's have a look. Just win back the pawn, and I think you've got a nice edge here in this position. So in any case, that wasn't played. So yeah, I think I spent quite a lot of time in this position, and I tried to find like a refutation here to the c5 move, and perhaps the move I played probably wasn't all that good. I thought it looked really good, but it really wasn't. So I played bishop to c5, and the problem with it is, okay, so practically speaking, we've moved the same piece twice, and all I've done is give black a check, and actually that's going to speed up black's development here. So he played knight to d7. Actually, not the most accurate move. You could do this one. It's a little bit accurate in my opinion. But this move is also fine. I then tried to exploit the pen, thinking, oh, maybe I can win something here, but it doesn't really lead to anything. He does bishop to e7. He's now getting ready to castle next move. Everything's defended fine here. So I tried to keep creating complications here. But now this knight to c7 move really kind of threw me a bit. I didn't see this coming, and well, I think black does all right here. He seems to have weathered a lot of the early complications, and at some point now he's going to be trying to castle in the next few moves. So well, I start swapping everything off. I start to get a bit low on time here, and it sounds crazy, and we're on move 11, but I was down to maybe my last 5 minutes at this point. So I'd spent I would say probably a good hour, 50 minutes looking at all these continuations, and it just didn't really lead to anything. So now I played d3. I didn't really want to just take this bishop off, because, well, I think that solves all of black's issues. And this knight's really well placed here, so I want to leave it there. So I played d3. I'm just going to aim to try and reclaim this pawn. So knight to e6, now defending the pawn. I can still capture. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to take this knight, this pawn, and then to go into this sort of continuation, both even for both players. I quite like White's chances here. I think his position's a lot more active, but bear in mind we've got two knights versus 2 bishops, so positionally speaking, assuming Black can hold on for dear life in the next few moves, he should do absolutely fine here. You know, if he can get into an endgame, these bishops will really start to really, I don't know, I guess control this position against White. But yeah, this is where it got really, really interesting. I didn't play that move. I played Bishop D2, and you may be wondering why I played this move. It's because I actually made a mouse slip. So in a crucial, critical point in the game, I mouse slipped, and I was like, "Oh no! Why have I done that? Why have I done that move?" Thankfully, it wasn't the worst mouse slip. Imagine if I played like this move, let's say. That would have been even worse. But you know, it's really interesting actually here. It doesn't like this capture. That's so strange. I suppose we can take here. Gosh, what an interesting... okay, I didn't look at this actually. But maybe this move wasn't actually that bad. But G5 could be played, like, let's be honest. But imagine if I did that instead. Interesting. Right, so Bishop D2 was played, total mass slip, and, well, I just lose a tempo here because I wanted to take this pawn, but I've now wasted 2 moves trying to take it instead of 1. So, this bishop came back to C8, so it now uncovers these potential threats. So actually, I can't really take this pawn anymore. If I do, what will happen is Queen will come to D4, and well, you can see there's now a double attack on this bishop. So quite a cunning move order here. Although, can I do this move? Just out of curiosity, if he takes, why can't I take this? Oh, I see, it's pinned. Okay, ignore my thoughts there. Okay, so that would be the first line. So here now I just played for complication. I was really low on time. I was down to my last, I think, 15 seconds. Of course, we get an extra 45 seconds each move. So I just tried to create a complicated move because I was running a bit low on time. After G6. Okay, it used up a bit. It gave me a little bit of time to think. I just played my queen back to E2, but I've made no progress in this position. I've only really just tried to encourage a bit of light square weaknesses in my opponent's position. So black square weaknesses, I should say. Now, here, he played the move bishop to F6, and, well, I was very happy to see this move, as now I can recapture this pawn. The idea being, of course, this queen check line doesn't work anymore. Because after I move my king across, okay, if he takes here, you'll notice now I can move this knight with a check. In the actual, I think the best position here is you can do this, and then after, let's say, this capture, you can then throw in this check here. So that would be the best move there. So I was quite happy to do that. I can recapture the pawn. He castled here. And, well, now the threat's back on against this bishop, so I probably should have maybe just moved the knight over to c4, but again, I was running low on time. I just elected to get my king out of the way, so I just moved my king to h1. And, well, this gives him a real advantage. He can, in fact, get a really good edge in this game after knight takes here. But he played knight to d4. If he takes knight takes on f4, there's a few complications here on this knight, so I would have to try and defend it, and after trying to defend it, I'd actually in fact lose the exchange now. So certainly some really interesting continuations that I wish if we had more time we probably could have got into. But I think actually at this particular point, after my king h1, he was down to maybe his last 8 or 7 minutes or so, so he wasn't that good on time either, despite me being on virtually 2 or 3 seconds left in this position. So yeah, so knight came to d4. I then moved my queen to f2. I wanted to keep an eye on the c2 square, so although it's not really the worst thing in the world for knight to capture here, because I've got some good continuations, but again, I'm low on time. I haven't really got much time to think about these things, so I'm just trying to play for complications. Bishop came to d7. I just got my rooks to good squares. I thought, why not? b6 was played, and I was very happy to see this move. I think my opponent at this point was just, again, he was getting low on time here, so I just thought he might want to get his bishop to b7 and create some complications along here. But in actual fact, this now gives me some really good squares to potentially come to with this knight. So I played knight to c4, and I'm just aiming to jump into the square. Knight came to e6, hitting my bishop, and I just ran my bishop back to g2. In actual fact, a much stronger continuation here was moving my bishop to d6, and this is really difficult to parry this threat. You know, he's now hitting the rook. If he moves his rook to e8, suddenly my queen comes crashing in. So in actual fact, he has to give up the exchange here. You know, I have to play moving like bishop to d7, and I can play for more crazy stuff with knight to d5, but I think this just simply does fine as well. As continuation is pretty good. I'm up in exchange. I'm doing fine. I've still got even ideas of just jumping in these knights into this into these lovely squares. So I was very happy to see that anyway. So anyway, so I moved my bishop back to g3. Again, I don't want to create too many complications. Well, I say I'm trying to create complications, but at the same time, I don't want to give myself a headache trying to think about all the positions, because again, I'm down to like my last minute, so it's very, very difficult to see everything. The pawn came to f5, so he's trying to trap my bishop, but I was quite happy to see this, as now I played queen to f3, and this now attacks the rook. And there's not a whole lot that he can do here. If he plays bishop to d7, which now defends it with the queen, I can in fact jump my queen to d5, and this now exploits a new pin. So after he moves his king out the way, I can then capture here, and I win. I go up in a whole exchange, so I say an exchange, a rook for 2 minor pieces, but I've still got very good activity here, so this is a very advantageous position. The computer line, I mean, I just looked at the computer just to see what a good continuation might look like, but maybe queen to e8 to try and swap off my pieces and get rid of my activity. I can move my queen to d5 with rook to d8, queen to f3. Okay, I'm up material here. I've got no issues in my position. You know, pawns are equal. I'm up in exchange. I think I'm doing absolutely fine here. So certainly an interesting continuation that I could have happened. But in the actual game, what happened here now is my opponent played knights to g5, and this was a blunder. And I think to be fair to my opponent, he was low on time as well. I think he was down to his last 2 or 3 minutes. So I think this was just a time pressure blunder now. I quickly swiped off this rook, and there's not a whole lot that black can do here now. He tried to play queen to d7 to potentially set up, trying to trap my queen here, but I just played my queen to d5, throwing the check in, and now that forces off a few pieces off. So I'm up a clear rook, and I'm entering into a winning ending, so that the game didn't really continue much longer than this. b5 was played, my knight came to d6, trying to hit this bishop. Bishop e6, I threw in another check, and now I played bishop to h4. And this was just a simple tactic, trying to move this defender, and then I can take this bishop. And here my opponent just played bishop to a2, allowing me to take this this knight off, and well, I play h6. There's not really much more here because I just captured this this pawn, and I was just winning a rook now. So it was certainly a really interesting position. I think at the end it kind of devolved into a bit of I guess a bit of a blunderfest in the end, unfortunately. But you know, I think going back to this I think it was knight to bishop to d2. This was certainly really interesting after this mouse slip, and you know, we certainly had I think he had a very good position here after I made this mouse slip, and it's a real shame. But even after this bishop here, it would have been a really interesting game. So, yeah, not my best win, has to be said. But nonetheless, I tried to play a complicated game. it worked in favour for me, as in the end my opponent blundered and I ended up going up an entire rook. So, any case, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care.